The wind changed. It came down from the north now, colder, heavier, the kind of wind that carried warning more than weather. The leaves had turned the color of dying fire. The days grew shorter, and the children's laughter, though still present, now came quieter, as if even they could sense something in the air had shifted. Thomas sat near the fence line at dawn, sharpening the blade of a rusted sickle, eyes scanning the far ridge. The sheepdog Eleanor had rescued weeks ago stood beside him, ears twitching toward the hills. They were both listening, because the banker had promised to return. And men like him didn't speak unless they meant it. Inside the house, Eleanor was packing the children's clothes in silence. She wasn't running, not yet, but something in the way she folded each coat, as if it might be the last time, told Thomas everything he needed to know. She came to him that evening while the children slept. "If they come," she said, "don't fight them." Thomas didn't look up. She stepped closer. "This land's not worth dying for." His voice came quiet, nearly lost in the wind. "It's not the land." Her breath caught. He stood, brushing dust from his hands. "They want me off it, but it's not just mine anymore." Thunder growled in the distance. A dry storm, the kind that never rained, only threatened. At midday they arrived. 3 horses. 4 men. The banker among them, riding proud in a cream-colored coat, like blood had never touched his hands. One man dismounted and cocked a rifle. "Final offer," the banker called. $500 to walk away. Thomas didn't move. Behind him, Eleanor stepped outside, the rifle in her arms shaking only slightly. The banker's smile thinned. "You'd risk blood over scrubland and ghosts?" Thomas looked at him then, truly looked, eyes hardened not with rage, but with memory. "This isn't your land," the banker hissed. "Never was." He raised a hand. The rifleman took aim. The world held its breath. Then a scream. The youngest child had darted from the house, too fast, too frightened, running toward Thomas, arms outstretched. The gun went off. Thomas turned on instinct, caught the boy mid-run. Pain exploded through his left shoulder. He dropped to one knee, gritting his teeth, pulling the child against his chest with his good arm. Blood soaked his sleeve. The boy was crying but unhurt. Thomas lifted his head. The rifleman reloaded. And then another shot. But not from them. From Eleanor. Her rifle smoked at the barrel. The banker's man dropped like a stone. The others panicked. 2 turned and bolted. The third reached for his pistol, but Eleanor had already cocked again. "Go," she said, voice flat. The banker froze. Thomas, bleeding but upright, met his eyes. "Next time bring a lawyer. Not wolves." The banker spit in the dirt, turned, and rode away. Silence fell. Dust blew across the porch. Eleanor rushed to Thomas, dropping to her knees. Her hands found the wound, pressed tight. Her breath trembled. "You stayed," she whispered. "I didn't want to," he said, voice raw. "But I needed to." She looked at him then, fully, painfully, and for the first time, not as a stranger who had appeared in her story, but as someone who had been walking the same road all along, just from a different side. Days passed. He healed slow. She stitched the wound herself. The children took turns bringing him food in the barn, then forgot to leave, curling up beside him in the straw like he'd always been there. The graveyard grew by one, no name, no stone. Just a small marker on the far side of the ridge, where the rifleman fell. Eleanor said nothing. But that night, she sat beside it for a long time. Then winter crept in. Snow came thin at first, just a whisper across the hills. Thomas moved back into the house.
He didn't ask.
She didn't offer. It just happened the way seasons do. One morning, he found the oldest boy near the barn, trying to fix a broken stirrup. Thomas knelt beside him, said nothing, just handed him a stronger nail. The boy looked up. "You gonna stay this time?" Thomas nodded. "If your mama lets me." She already did, the boy said, and went back to hammering. The land didn't turn green overnight, but the well held. The fields held. The house, battered and burned and built again, still stood.
So did they.
The wind no longer carried warning, just weather. One evening, Eleanor sat beside Thomas on the porch. They said nothing, just watched the sun go down behind the hills like a lantern being lowered beneath the world. A soft voice broke the silence. The littlest girl, in her nightgown, climbed onto Thomas's lap and held out a drawing. Him. With them. All of them. Hands joined. Smiling. Thomas's throat tightened. He kissed the top of her head. Inside the house, the fire crackled. Outside, the night wrapped them gently. The ranch hadn't been saved. It had been rebuilt. And so had he. The wind didn't leave. It clung to the valley, pushing through broken fence posts, sneaking beneath doors like it was looking for something to take. Days passed. Thomas fixed what he could, barn beams, water pump, the leaning fence by the eastern slope, but it was like patching holes in a sinking ship with dry grass. Still, he kept moving. Quiet hands, quiet thoughts. The children stayed mostly inside. But sometimes, from the edge of the field, he'd catch a glimpse, bare feet in the dust, the scrape of a tin pail, the flick of a braid disappearing behind the house. They didn't speak to him, not really, but they stopped hiding. He saw them watching when he chopped firewood. He saw the oldest boy trying to imitate his movements when he thought no one was looking, swinging a stick like an axe, determined but awkward. Thomas didn't step in. Not yet. Trust wasn't something you earned in a day. Then, one evening, as dusk poured down from the hills like spilled paint, he found the girl standing in his path. Freckles across her cheeks. Hair tied with twine. She held out a dull-bladed knife. Can you sharpen it like potted? He took it, tested the edge with his thumb. Didn't say a word. Just knelt near a rock, pulled a whetstone from his saddlebag, and started to grind. Slow, even strokes. She sat cross-legged, watching every movement. After a while, her little brother wandered over and watched too. By the time he finished, 4 of the 5 children had gathered. Silent. Watching. The youngest sat nearest, clutching a battered tin cup with both hands, as if it were something precious. Thomas handed the blade back, handle first. The girl nodded. Didn't smile. But her fingers touched his for the briefest second. And then they vanished into the house again, like deer back into the trees. That night, he lit a fire in the barn and stared into the flames until they blurred. He heard something then, a soft, unfamiliar sound. Laughter. Muffled, behind the walls of the house. Children. It didn't sound like joy. It sounded like survival. Like they were reminding each other the world hadn't stolen everything. In the weeks that followed, the rhythm deepened. He hunted. They cooked. He fixed. They mended. She stitched the lining in his coat, left a tin cup by his fire. He chopped wood and left a full stack beside their door, even though he never saw her take it in. It was like a dance no one admitted they were part of. Then one morning, the frost came. He found her behind the barn, crouched near the shallow grave he hadn't touched. A simple cross. David Lane. He hadn't asked about the man. It wasn't his place. But now he saw the truth etched in the way her shoulders curved inward, her fingers brushing frost from the top of the wooden cross like it was a child's forehead. There was a medal nailed to the side. A Union medal. Faded. And something else. A child's drawing, tacked to the wood with a bent nail. A sketch of a rider on horseback. Lines crude, but the intent clear. The rider held a boy across his saddle. The boy was bleeding. The rider looked tired. Thomas's fingers tightened. He knew that day. That boy. The Battle of Franklin. Smoke thick as tar. Flames climbing the trees. Screams torn open in the dark. He'd carried a boy that night. Maybe 10, maybe 11. Couldn't save him. Held him while the world burned around them. Wrote a letter he never signed and left it with the body when he couldn't carry it any farther. And now the memory was nailed to a grave in Wyoming. He didn't move for a long time. Just stood there, letting the guilt crawl back up his spine like old fire. That evening, she met him by the well. "I know who you are," she said. Her voice didn't accuse. It just existed. He didn't respond. "I found the letter." Her eyes stayed on the horizon. "It was never signed. But I knew. He swallowed. The wind played with her shawl, lifting it like breath. I couldn't save him, he said. I know, she said. And that was it. No more words. Just the sound of the pump creaking behind them and a hawk crying overhead. Days passed. Then came the storm. It rolled in just after sundown, thunder like cannon fire, rain like fists on the roof. The children huddled close inside. Thomas stood on the porch, shoulders soaked, watching lightning tear across the sky. Get in here, she called. Not a plea, a command. He did. He hadn't been inside since the first day. It looked different now, warmer, not because of the fire but because it was lived in. Paper dolls dangled from the mantel. A broken clock ticked out of rhythm. The children's boots were lined by the hearth like soldiers in a row. He stood near the doorway, unsure. She handed him a towel. The youngest child stared at him for a long while, then crossed the floor, climbed onto his lap, and fell asleep. He didn't move for hours. In the middle of the night, he woke to the sound of Eleanor's voice, soft, singing something old and wordless. He opened his eyes. She was sitting by the fire, staring into it. Her hands clutched something. A locket. It caught the light just enough to show the photo inside. 2 soldiers. One of them was him. She didn't look at him, didn't ask anything. But she knew, and now he knew too, that somehow, through blood and war and fire, fate had pulled them to the same valley, and neither of them had chosen it. Yet both of them stayed. The next morning, he found her near the edge of the woods, rifle in hand. Wolves had been circling. Too close, she said, cocking the lever. She didn't need saving. Never had. But when she stumbled on the slope, he caught her arm. Their eyes met. Long enough. Then she nodded. Pulled away. They went back to work without a word. Later that day, a man came riding up the trail, slick suit, white gloves, a face like spoiled milk. Banker. He held up a paper and smirked. That dollar deed? Worthless. This land still owes debt. Can't be legally owned till it clears. Thomas stared him down. It's cleared enough for me. The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You'll want to reconsider that position, friend. Thomas didn't reply. But when the banker rode off, Eleanor didn't speak either. They both knew the storm hadn't passed. It had only begun. That night, Thomas sat by the fire again. The children drifted to sleep. One whispered something in a dream. The little girl who'd given him the knife laid her hand over his, just for a moment. And in that moment, Thomas Cade realized something terrifying. He cared. And for a man like him, caring was more dangerous than bullets. The wind howled across the plains like a wounded beast, dragging the scent of smoke and scorched cedar through the dry August air. A lone figure on horseback rode against it, a man whose silhouette leaned not with pride, but weariness, as though the dust of the past clung heavier than the trail behind him. His name was Thomas Cade. His coat was threadbare, stained with old blood and ash. A scar curled along the left edge of his jaw, rough and raised like a memory that refused to fade. His right hand, gloved in cracked leather, held the reins. His left clutched a folded piece of paper. The deed. It flapped in the wind, edges torn, seal barely legible. $1 had bought him 160 acres of dead soil, one burned-out house, and a barn that leaned like it was praying for mercy. It wasn't a dream. It was a disappearance. The horse slowed as they crested the final rise. Below, the ranch. He didn't remember breathing. Just a long, hollow quiet as he stared down at what was supposed to be his new start. The house's roof had caved on the western side. Ash streaked the outer walls like claw marks. Fence posts leaned like broken teeth. The land had been ravaged by fire, then drought. And something else, something crueler. Abandonment. Thomas dismounted slowly. His boots sank into brittle grass. A lone crow sat on a fence post, watching unblinking. He met its gaze, then turned his back to it. He didn't believe in omens anymore. The porch creaked beneath his weight as he stepped onto it. The wood groaned like it resented the company. His fingers brushed the doorknob, and for a long moment, he stood there, hand frozen, as though behind that door waited a memory, not emptiness. Then he pushed it open. The air inside was cold. Still. Light filtered through slats in the boarded windows. Dust floated like ash in shafts of gold. The hearth sat dead. Cobwebs veiled the rafters. An iron kettle rested in the corner, long rusted. But something was wrong. His eyes narrowed. Boots scuffed the floor. His fingers gripped the rifle from his back, slow, silent. There. Near the hearth. A child's shoe. He didn't move. From the dark, a whisper. "Please don't take Mama." The voice was small, fragile, like the last leaf clinging to a dead tree. Thomas turned. In the corner, behind a patched quilt pinned as a curtain, 5 small faces peeked out. Children. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10. The youngest, a toddler, wore a coat far too big, sleeves dragging. All thin, eyes wide. One clutched the other's sleeve, trembling. And then she stepped out. The woman. She moved like someone who hadn't rested in weeks or months. Her hair was tied back, face streaked with soot and shadow. She held a cast-iron skillet in both hands like it was a weapon, not a tool. She didn't speak right away. Neither did he. They just stared. Until finally, in a voice low and resolute, she said, "You're not supposed to be here." Thomas's mouth was dry. His voice came graveled. "Neither are you." Her jaw clenched. "We didn't steal it." "I didn't say you did." A beat of silence passed. Then the youngest child coughed, a raw, barking sound, and it shattered the stillness. The girl beside him wrapped a thin blanket tighter around his shoulders. Thomas looked back toward the door, then at the children, then at her. "I bought this land," he said. $1. "No one sells land for $1 unless they're trying to bury it." He didn't answer, just stepped back. The wind from the door caught the edge of the curtain, and for a moment, it fluttered like a ghost. "I didn't know anyone lived here," he added quietly. "I'll take the barn." But he didn't turn his back until he'd reached the steps. And even then, he looked back once more, just to be sure the children weren't fading like smoke. That night, he sat in the hayloft, staring at the flame of a single match before letting it burn out in his fingers. He didn't light a fire. He didn't eat. He just watched the stars emerge, one by one, through the hole in the roof, wondering why fate had led him to the one place in the world that wasn't truly abandoned. In the stillness, he could hear them. Soft movements in the house. A lullaby hummed off-key. The creak of old floorboards. And then silence again, heavy as snow. He dreamed of a different time. Of a smaller hand in his. Of a grave no one visited. Of a war he couldn't stop reliving. In the dream, the house wasn't burned. The land wasn't dry. And the laughter of a child rang clear through the trees. But when he woke, there was only wind, and the long groan of a house trying to forget its own memories. By dawn, he was on his feet. He took the last piece of bread from his satchel, still wrapped in wax paper, and placed it on the porch steps. Said nothing. Left no note. He spent the day fixing the well crank. The chain was rusted, the bucket split. But his hands remembered how to work, how to make something stay. When he returned to the barn, the bread was gone. The next day, it rained, a cruel, mocking drizzle that left more mud than hope. But when he walked past the porch again, he saw something resting on the step. A patched glove, stitched with care. His glove. She had fixed it. Without thanks. Without words. He didn't smile. But he didn't frown either. That night, he lit a fire in the barn. And for the first time in a long while, he slept without waking.